There we go. Cool. All right. Well, Mark, thanks for doing this, man. I felt like you and I probably known each other longer than the amount of times we spoke on video person.
Yeah, it's pretty weird, right? You know people online, but then you see them at a party, like, is that who I think it is? But I'm not sure, but I think it is. Yeah. Right. And then years go by, and then now we're doing something like this, right? So
yeah, exactly. Well, cool, man. Yeah. So I wanted to go into a couple of things with you. I mean, there's a ton of things going on. I saw, so it's kind of, topical at the moment, but very important given the overlap of, both, blockchain, crypto, politics, kind of at the apex of everything, is what's going on in Canada. I know I saw you've been I see you've been pretty active tweeting about what's going on. There's you and several other people that I'll see what people are saying to get a pulse and not miss kind of the updates. But what's your take on the latest? That last video was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing in Canada is actually super disturbing. And I think, from where I sit, I do have a lot of friends on all sides of all aisles.
Yeah.
And I do, I try to listen to everybody, right? Because I think it's important that we have our ears open. You're not going to convince the other side if you're yelling at them, right? So, if they're just stupid people and they're irredeemable and they think the same as you, then nobody's talking, right? And the reason why someone else feels the way they do is they've been hurt in some way, and you have to get inside their head and find out what that is in order to communicate. So that said, I basically came out real hard against Justin Trudeau. In my mind, he has crossed the Rubicon, like for real, the Rubicon, and has gone to a very dark place. He's now an authoritarian, dictatorial. He's done the thing that dictators do. And I think it's just sort of hard to believe because he looks like, he looks all nice and happy and like a 70s fluffy guy, right? So it's hard to think of him as a supervillain. But when you actually look at his actions, they truly are those of a supervillain. He has
good hair,
attacked working class protesters, his people, his own people, and declared them terrorists and cut them off from funds. He's looking to hurt them really bad, right? So this is not something that democratically elected leaders do. So this is tyranny. He's actually crossed that line. So as it pertains to cryptocurrency, crypto is sort of, I think, sort of in the blast radius of everything he's doing. So I don't think it's an anti-crypto move per se. Just it's any financial support is being knocked off. Now, if you compare this to sort of the Black Lives Matter and those other protests that happened a couple of years ago, where people went to jail for trying to kill people or setting things on fire, and the GoFundMe's got set up for their lawyers to defend them, right? And at no time, and while I disagree with the actions of those protesters, at no time did it even occur to me to say, hey, GoFundMe should shut down their supporters, right? Like it just didn't even go through my mind. And the fact that Trudeau is doing this is unconscionable, and it shows that he's trying to silence his political enemies, which that's what dictators do.
Yeah, no, I think I echo all that. I think it's crossed over a point where, and it's really weird when it happens because everything kind of flirts with this line and and things sort of happen slowly and incrementally, and you almost see at a big level different massive large groups of people. They kind of allow one thing and then they look up a year or two later and you're like, whoa, like I didn't realize that, this is where that led. And then it jumps into this new territory, right? Where it is now, like you said, where, it's like literally freezing their resources, and it's like, we've given like not you and I, but like, I mean, the US has dropped off like barrels of cash to dictators and terrorists. And we've been in a spot where would give money to people like that. And then you have countries that are like, okay, these people are a problem. Let's try to say it's a problem. Now let's try to give them fines. Now let's try to send in tow trucks. Oh, they won't do it. Now let's try the military. And then it's like, and then it elevates to let's steal their resources while they're not in jail, while they're not like, I mean, maybe they're committing some traffic crimes, right? Maybe, or infractions, I'd say. But yeah, and then to your other point, it's hard because it's like there's a funny meme going around where it's like one of those I forget the actual math term for it, but you've got like the four axes, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, it just feels like, it's like, wow, like, it's like you've got a very tight point, a viewpoint that most people have, or not most people, but I'd say like a lot of the biggest, you know, conduits of information have, whether it's like traditional media and a lot of those things that do get amplified on social media, obviously all of the big news, a lot of the biggest businesses, there's kind of this viewpoint. And then anything outside of that, you know, you've got like a very tiny chance to sort of, you know, remedy it and apologize and mean something different, or it's casted as something else. And it's just, it's funny to see a lot of these like same, is you I think, I mean, how do you feel about it? I feel like a lot of it's like the emperor with no clothes on, like really seeing a lot of these kind of tactics for what they are, you know, that people on all sides definitely use, but it's so glaring because it's happened back to back to back with huge people that people on both sides are like, whoa, like I don't know if Joe Rogan's that, or I don't know if it's in a really weird space now, man, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, as you know, as we've seen online, you know, Rogan has 14 times the size audience as CNN, right? Which is just insane. And CNN can't even crack 1 million viewers these days, right? So, and I think the reason is pretty clear. Is, you know, when you listen to Joe Rogan, if you actually listen to him, you know, he's not the smartest guy in the world, right? Probably by his own admission. But he might be the most honest in the sense that he will listen to his guests. He will try to get to the truth. And when he's wrong, or when he thinks that he's wrong, in my experience, he's tried to admit it, right? So I kind of feel like I'm in the hands of someone who's trying to get to the root of what the truth is. He's not trying to push some view down my throat, right? And he's willing to have people on his show. You know, there's a lot of people sort of trying to discredit the people he's had on his show, but like that mRNA guy, right? He is the world's leading expert in mRNA vaccines. He is a co-inventor of the space, and he has a different opinion, right?
Yeah,
so,
and just that's sorry for interrupting, but I think that's a really good like stopping point. And you know, as it's pertinent and recent. I mean, with Robert Malone, there's like, I mean, major organizations people look to sort of, you know, verify information and post that are saying pretty wild things about that guy. And I think anybody who has even taken you know, 5, 10, 15 minutes to Google and actually figure out who that guy is. I mean, it's very easy to find like several patents that he's a part of. And a lot of these are, yeah, core breakthroughs within mRNA and the current state of those vaccines. And either way, it's like before, let's say the last 2 months, right? Who is that guy? That guy's a, you know, pretty popular, somewhat like doctor who's going to all these events, who's in the community, who's reading papers, publishing papers, going back and forth. So he's a very active member of that community, who's a, you know, not only active member, but a very big, pretty decent sized contributor too. And then to be made as if that guy is like, you know, the husband who him and his wife ate horse paste or something. You know what I mean? It's like, how are they casting him like he's this lunatic? And I mean, and if you watch that episode, a lot of the ways that, like, you know, fact checkers, different people are presenting it is basically like, you know, oh, he's spreading misinformation and conspiracy theory. I specifically remember almost being annoyed in that episode, not actually, but almost, because he was so insistent on saying, Joe, like, I'm not going to give my opinion on this person's intentions or what this means. This is data. So I'll give you data. And I've never once heard anybody do any sort of breakdown saying the actual data he's sharing is incorrect. You know, I mean, like, did you see what he shared about, like, with Uttar Pradesh and that they, you know, the packages they gave their citizens?
I did not see that one, but go ahead. Tell me what that.
Yeah.
Tell me what.
So if anybody doesn't know, I mean, just like Spark Notes, Uttar Pradesh is I believe a state in India, like a very big state, and the population size is somewhat comparable to the U.S. It's like around 300 million or so.
Oh, I remember this. That's right, because I remember that detail. Go ahead. Finish.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what happened was, their government was like, okay, you know, we've gotten a ton of data from other countries who've encountered, you know, this particular strand of COVID and had issues with it. Let's be proactive, right? So they're like, okay, we've got a population where people live really close, right? Maybe living conditions of a decent, you know, pretty decent size of the population, sanitary wise, like that's something we've got to combat, right? So let's be proactive. Let's send people out packages. And so they did this, and they sent out everybody, they sent packages to everybody. People took these packages proactively, and you saw like some cases and deaths, and then just flatline, done. They
What was in those packages? What was in them?
Yeah, so that's the biggest part, right? Anybody, any rational person would go, well, awesome. Like the goal is for people to be, the goal is for people to not be sick and be healthy. What was in it? Like, I would love to know what's in it. And I don't know exactly the framing, but it was like they were in process of sharing that, getting into other places. They got a visit by, the Biden administration, and then very quickly, like, hush hush, it has not been to this day, to my knowledge.
They covered up what it was.
Yeah, to say what was actually in the packages. Yeah,
but there is some speculation.
Yeah,
that it was the I word, right? The horse paste, that they actually used it, and that's. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm correct about this, but that's what
I've heard the same thing, that ivermectin was a part of that, right? And again, like none of anything that we're saying is like advice or anything people should do. We're just talking about like what's going on, and it's there's no
whatever was whatever's in those packages should be known. Like there's no question.
Well, right? Even if it was not working, we should know, right? Because then the scientific community can learn and go, well, let's not do that. Yeah, and so it's not, and it's wild because like, I mean, so I a lot of times I spent a lot of my time in Colombia, and through the course of all this stuff going on, whether it's like hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, a lot of these things like they come up as like, there's studies that are coming out, certain people sort of attach as, say, hey, this is maybe something that could work. And then you just see the machine go into action and turn that, completely neutralize that thing, or turn it into like a, like a Voldemort kind of thing that you just can't mention. And in Colombia, like, I mean, I have friends who've been taking some of those things I mentioned for a while, for different things, for several years, whenever they get some kind of mild infection. And I think at the core of it, it just comes down, I mean, it's business, right? I mean, it's business. And I think people using situations, to fit into their, overall agenda, and then those kind of things overlapping. Because I think ivermectin's like 10 cents a dose or something like that. The last study that
it's pretty low. How much I do know. So
yeah,
but I will tell you what I'm always trying to be careful to not speak about things I don't know about.
Yeah.
But here's something I do know about firsthand. So I've been to India multiple times, and anyone who's never been to India, it's hard to convey to them the sheer density of human that exists everywhere in India. Like there's just so many people. There's always tons of people everywhere, always. And when COVID first hit, my first thought was, oh my God, India is screwed because social distancing is literally impossible. Like people live in the same house. There's like 12 people living in a 1-bedroom apartment, right? It's that kind of thing. Any motorcycle that goes by has like 5 people on it, right? Anytime if you're in the middle of the woods, like I've been driven for hours and hours outside the main cities of India, and it's sort of like their forest, and there's still tons of people in the road, in the fields, everywhere, just like it's a city, right? It never thins out. And yet India was not screwed. India's line has been rather flat, right? And the same thing for Africa. Like somehow India and Africa like just escaped this thing. I mean, sure, there have been deaths, but nothing like it should have been if this was a super deadly pandemic of the way we've reacted to it, right? Is as if, we should have seen a lot more impact in India and Africa. That much I am sure of, and we did not see it. I don't know the reasons for that, but that is something that I found very puzzling since this whole thing began.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good observation. I mean, I think everybody overall, and we could, I think, jump to some crypto stuff too. I think a lot of people, me included, have like COVID exhaustion to some extent, because it's something that, there are certain people making certain decisions, and, given the rules of the game and the rules of certain systems and governance, like regardless of, there being such a, whether some of those things are disconnected from facts, reality, data, certain people still are able to make some of those decisions. And the craziest thing for me is like traveling. So I, I spent a little bit of time for the holidays in the US. I'm here in Colombia. Right before the holidays, I was in Europe. I was in Vienna, Switzerland, Budapest, right? And it's so wild where you could just take a train from Vienna to Budapest, and you get to the state, or the border crossing of the two countries, and the entire staff takes their masks off. Totally different when you get over there, and you go over there, and it's like you time traveled on that trip. And again, like the beautiful part about there being so many different countries and cultures and cities is that everybody doesn't live the same everywhere. But it is super weird and glaring with COVID, where you could be in the US where you're like an hour or two flight from a place, right? And you have one spot where People can go to, people go to Super Bowls, big games, hanging out, no mask, but the kids go to school with it on. And then you take an hour
Which
flight
makes
somewhere and
zero sense.
there's none of that
Yeah.
going on. And you're like, it's hard to stitch how, yeah, anybody could be so unaware of some of these things that are, I think, right there for people to see, but I digress. Yeah. Nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I mean, I think we're at a point now where, look, when this thing first began, we didn't know what it was, right? So kind of the overreaction was a bit forgivable. But we reacted to it like it was smallpox, like it was bubonic plague, and and then it wasn't. It was more than a cold, but not much more, right? And so, and now we're in a place where we know this, and yet people don't want to let go of the restrictions for some fucking reason that I can't even fathom. I don't know whether they just enjoy the control, or whether there's something else going on. I don't know, but it is weird. And
yeah, I think I was telling a buddy.
There's something odd about that.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. No, I think no, there's something definitely really odd about that. I was talking to a friend about this the other day, and I think one of the things going on is I think there's a lot of people, right, who are sort of in their own world, in their own bubble, and as are we all to like some percentage, right, versus like the greater bubble of what's going on. And I think a lot of times people, I think if the idea in their mind came to reality of like, okay, there's sort of these like systems in place and these rails that like I've put certain levels of faith in, or whatever it is, a certain outlet. Like I've assumed that they've done the due diligence to get this thing to me and that it's gone through a particular process. I think like the reality of some people, I think having to admit that maybe that's not what they thought it was it's a very fear-based, it really triggers and I think opens up a whole can of worms on the fear side of things for people, because I think that would make people realize like, wow, like, I'm not within this sort of whatever. I'm not within where I thought I was, and I think that is, I mean, whatever people call it, red pilling, a lot of different things, different moments, whatever's going on. But yeah, I think that leap is a lot for people, given it would be a big leap regardless. But I think when you've got the other active things going on behind the scenes, sort of manipulating people, right, whether it's through media I mean, a lot of these things, I don't know, I don't want to say it's not like a few people designing it, but regardless, like, if people are looking to big media to get their information, right, the way that information is presented is meant to keep you on the wheel and in a particular state for certain reasons, and I think a lot of people are very unaware that that's even going on.
Yeah, I will say this. I mean, I do think that a lot more people are sort of getting hip to, the bad stuff going on. And I did notice one thing during the whole Trudeau stuff thing that happened recently is the people, a lot of people said, including me, were very outspoken against it. And we're very horrified. And normally people who are sort of, Trudeau supporters would have jumped in the comments and been like, dude, no, blah, blah, blah. Trudeau's totally cool, right? And what I noticed the most was those people were silent. Trudeau did not have fans when he did that move. Even the people that would normally be his fans, they were just silent. So at the very least, they were stunned and like, it felt like even they didn't expect him to do something like that. And even they were horrified and shocked. And I think that's new. And I think there has been some new realizations that have happened just in the last 3 days.
Oh, 100%. I think that the first thing you started that with is that there's so many people, and I think this is true in my world too, that so many times, like, I mean, if I would have asked, them to give me sort of a temperature check on where they're at, I mean, they're 100% aligned with like, you know what I mean? The very mainstream, headline-y kind of opinion of the day. And so many of those people are either just like, hey man, I'm just tapped out, I'm just not down with this anymore, or they're starting to see it. And that's super, super interesting. And I think with Trudeau, or with Canada in general, what's so interesting about it is like, okay, like, of course you and I and everybody in between would prefer that this wasn't happening up there, right? Like, it sucks that they're dealing with it, but it is crazy ironic that it's happening in a country whose reputation is like, these are the nicest people ever, and like, they never get pissed. And so it's almost perfect that it is them, because anybody who would kind of be, casually looking is like, oh, there's a people who are upset with being oppressed by the government. Who's the people? Canadians. You're like, oh, they must have done something really wrong to them, because those people are never pissed off about anything.
Yeah, right. Right. It takes a lot to piss off Canadian truckers. Right? I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I and the fact that it sounds like, it feels like a South Park episode to say that, Canada now has a tyrannical despot problem, right? It doesn't sound real, right?
Do you
But
think
it's actually true, which is,
it's
sad, but true.
100%? Yeah. Do you think that in the US, because like, if you I think I've seen you post about some of the stuff, and regardless, like a lot of the different states that are pushing forward legislation, right? Whether it's like to have whatever, all the different things going on around, sort of around Bitcoin. I am sort of in the camp where I think it's more likely that you're going to sort of have this like weird divide in the US, almost like you do with COVID, but you're going to have it with Bitcoin, where you're going to have like states where it's fully integrated. You could pay for everything with it, right? Maybe they don't even tax it at the point of sale. And then it'll be like federally illegal depending on sort of who's in office. And you won't be able to do that if you go to California, but you will in like Colorado or like Idaho or something. Do you think that's more likely to be like a part of the phases as we go along?
Yeah, I do think the states, and there are a lot of them, are fighting back on the Bitcoin front. Obviously Wyoming has been sort of leading the charge. Now we have Florida, and now we have, who was it that declared taxes were payable? I think it was Arizona, right? Was it that just recently declared that taxes were payable? It just happened.
I thought it was Colorado. I think it's Colorado.
Colorado.
Yeah.
Right, because East Denver's going on right there right now, so that's probably why the announcement was made. So, so I think, and I think overwhelmingly, probably 2/3 of the states are somewhere along the spectrum of being pro Bitcoin, which is good, right? That's the way the founders, the government is supposed to operate from the bottom up, with the states really holding the bulk of the power and pushing things up to the federal level. So, the federal level is trying to smash down on Bitcoin, while 2/3 of the states are in one way or another pushing it up, as well as the rest of the world. The rest of the world is also adopting it increasingly as more time goes on. We're going to see more El Salvador's, right? El Salvador is just the first one. And I think it's inevitable. I think it's like trying to stop the internet in the 90s. Imagine if the United States outlawed the internet, right? So it's just dumb, right? The rest of the world would just continue along, and that's kind of what's happened. That's what will happen with crypto too. So yes, I think your thesis is right, that the states will continue to push it up, and eventually the feds will have to cave on it. And the people that are anti-Bitcoin will be thrown out of office. I think we're going to see that, because 25% of the population holds crypto, actually 26%, which is more than holds bank accounts, right? That just happened.
In what country? In the US?
In the United States of America, yes.
Wait.
Yeah,
only 26% of Americans. Is this like this would be adults, right? Or
yeah, I don't know how they calculate Americans, the bank accounts. I do know that the crypto figure is absolutely correct. I believe the banking figure sounds correct, right? That like not everyone has a bank account. Some people are kids, right? Some people, other people take care of them, so they don't have a bank account, right? So it does feel kind of right? So
interesting. Wow, I wouldn't have guessed that low though. That's crazy.
More percentage of people own Bitcoin, or own crypto, I should say, than have a bank account. So this is a thing, right? You can't just say, "Oh, this doesn't exist," and fight against it. You're going to have a mob, kind of up your ass if you are anti-crypto in DC. So
yeah, well, dude, I mean, imagine, like sometimes I'll sit and fantasize about what that world will be like, but it's fun thinking. I mean, like I'm not in the camp where I think the dollar's like going away anytime soon either. I don't know if you do or not, but
it's not going to go away.
Yeah, but like when the idea of like certain things just being priced in Bitcoin, like if you go to a store and there's like a Sats tag or whatever, and the idea that like the because if the dollar was in like a healthy state and not at the levels of inflation we have, like over time you'd assume the price of things should go down anyway, because innovations happen, new technologies, new processes, whatever. But the fact that like inflation is so rampant, it's constantly sort of fighting that. And so, things are just going up over time. But, that idea of like, oh man, like, last year this bike was like, 1 million sats and now it's 500,000 sats, like epic,
Right.
it's getting cheaper over time. Like that I think is such a flip for people. That's going to be so wild as you have more things like, real world things sort of for daily consumption priced in Bitcoin for either the consumer or like governments being like oil and whatnot. It's gonna be very interesting to see.
Yeah, it absolutely will. And I do think the dollar is in terrible shape. And I think it's worse shape than people think it's in. So, I mean, obviously, I don't think the dollar is going to go away, but I do think it is going to massively inflate. And I do think that, it will happen. It will look impossible. And then all of a sudden the runaway freight train will get going like it is in Turkey, right? We've now seen this shit happen in Turkey, right?
Yeah.
In Venezuela, it was,
Yeah,
Venezuela
yeah.
used to be a prosperous country like us, right? So it's not impossible. And in fact,
Oh no.
given the fact that we're 30 trillion in debt, given how fast we're printing money and we're not slowing down, and basically 80% of all dollars in existence have been printed in the last like 2.5 years. So that means that your dollar in your pocket is worth 1/5 of what it was in 2020. And it is right now, it's just not evenly distributed yet, right? So the bullwhip is cracking and we haven't had that last bit kind of go whap, right? But the little wave is moving along the bullwhip handle and neck of the whip. And we will, the end, when the end cracks, you will see that 4/5 vanish very quickly. And that's just the damage that's already been done, not the ongoing and continuing damage. So in that kind of environment, my own policy is to hold as few dollars as you can, because they're just melting, right?
Have you ever seen the website? I think it's fiatmarketcap.com.
No,
Check it out. No, it's cool.
Already.
It's it's basically coin market cap, but for I think coin market cap even has a filter now for this, but it's like basically every country's currency ranked as if they were a crypto, but they're priced, each unit, like each dollar is like priced in sats, right? So it's like $1 equals X amount of sats, but then you could see like the market cap kind of where Bitcoin ranks if it was a nation's currency amongst others. And I think it was basically like neck and neck. I think at like 14 with like the Russian ruble.
It's definitely big enough to be a country currency or even a reserve currency at this point.
Yeah.
So a small one, but
yeah,
it qualifies, right? Like I think the Swiss franc is like the smallest one. So,
yeah. Well, maybe a bit of a rabbit hole, but I wanted to see, just randomly thought about it while you were saying something. Had you ever followed up and seen or seen anybody post about or talk about like, okay, so I think like inevitably there's a lot of course, like incumbent groups that are threatened by Bitcoin and the success of it, and the bigger it gets, of course, like, a lot of more things become inevitable. So I think like it's not crazy to say that there may or may not be people who have or will in the future do whatever is possible with all the tools at their disposal to try to, let's say, keep the price down, right? Like I think you even see that with like the Fed, right? They'll signal something's happening, and it's like the announcement of the announcement in crypto is equivalent, right? But like, what do you think about the abilities of, like, let's just say you, Mark, like you're in charge of the Fed, right? And you have the ability to do a ton of things. Like, how long and how effectively could you hold down the price of Bitcoin, given that you can short it without ever having bought it, with units that you can just print yourself, and competing against a market of people who have to acquire those units with their own effort,
Right. No, I've actually tweeted about this a couple times.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I've sort of put on the bad guy hat and been like, okay, if I'm the supervillain, what am I going to do about this? And I think you hit the nail on the head. You have the ability to print infinite amount of dollars, and you don't really care if you do, because you already are printing infinite amount of dollars. So who cares? Another trillion more, whatever, right? So so what I would do is I would print money. I would buy Bitcoin in secret, in stealth. I would try to hide all this. And this is what I don't know. I don't know if it's possible to sort of cover these tracks effectively or not. It does feel like almost anything can be sleuthed out because of the open and transparent nature of the blockchain, which is effectively in a state of perpetual audit worldwide, right, by a million eyes. So hiding things is super hard. So I don't know if you could actually do this, but if I were the bad guy, I would buy a bunch of Bitcoin. I would hold it, and then periodically I would just dump it, kind of right when everyone is at their most euphoric. So people get used to, anytime they feel hope, they get used to just getting dumped on, right? And I would just keep, wash, repeat. But in order to make Bitcoin dunk in half, you kind of need like $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin. Well, you probably don't, because it just depends on, I don't know what the daily liquidity, actually, yeah, you don't. You just need the daily volume, just be able to need enough to be able to smash it down. Mm-hmm. But it would have to be a pretty sophisticated operation, and it has to be hidden well, because if it ever got discovered, it would have the opposite effect of reinforcing the fact that the United States government finds Bitcoin to be such a threat that it has to go to such extravagant lengths to attack it, that means it is valuable. That means it does have worth, and it would paradoxically tend to lend strength to it, I think. And I think, and let's just be honest about all of these things, right?
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about dollars, whether we're talking about money, whether we're talking about Bitcoin, the value that's described to them is simply human attention. It's in the imagination of the population. It's the only reason why dollars have any value. It's not an army. It's because enough people believe in it, right? And it's here. There is nothing else that matters more than sheer human belief. And that is true of crypto. That is true of dollars. The reason why we hold these beliefs is because there is a story that we're told, it's an army that backs it, or, whatever it is, or it's the blockchain, right? That's also a story that's told. And that matters, but the belief matters more. So I think, as belief, and the biggest danger to the dollar is that the mass belief is shifting rapidly from stodgy old dollars and that are inflating to modern digital, I can have it on my phone, digital assets. And I think because people feel that those things are more real than the numbers they see in their bank account, right? Or the paper that they hold in their hands, which feels kind of old-fashioned and goofy now, right? It feels like a fax machine. So I think that increases over time. Oh, sorry, I lost your audio.
Sorry, man. I was trying to just mute any background noise. Okay. No, I think that's super interesting. I just think, yeah, the game theory is super fun to watch some of the stuff play out. Like, I think it's always funny, like when you're in a particular day or a week, right, in the mindset of like being in that and the news that happens, and then kind of the hindsight of like looking back over like the past like 12 months, 24 months, 36, and like all these things happen. And sometimes it feels, yeah, like whatever, like there's it's inevitable. It's so far away, but it's funny, like all these little dominoes falling, right? You've got like oil companies mining it, like, like the NIDIGs of the world and the kind of money that like they're bringing into the space, and then like country adoption, US state adoption. And then all of a sudden, it's like
Ukraine just legalized it today.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh,
yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Ukraine just legalized it. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Wow. Okay. That would be cool.
Yeah.
If
you're right. There is this relentless march of adoption.
Yes, but it's like we relentlessly like basically a door opens and that door never closes, right? There's all these fake doors that continue to like, look at this door, China bans it, China opens it, China bans it, but regardless, it's like it is infecting, the seeds spreading, and there's really no way to bring that back. I don't know. Like, what do you think is the story with like somebody like Gary Gensler? Like, because I just can't wrestle with it's like there's so many people who are like, oh my God, you should see his lectures at the school. And when he was talking about Bitcoin and blockchain, and you're like, okay, like I just can't ever arrive at any other likely conclusions whenever you see somebody who's like, okay, you're like, this dude gets it. This guy's not dumb. Clearly, like he knows what's going on.
He's not stupid.
He gets it, but you're like, with power to do what should be done, he chooses to not do that. So you're like, okay, it's not because he doesn't get it. Like that's off the list because we know he gets
malicious.
it.
He's absolutely malicious actor.
Right.
He's not he's supposed to be a referee, and he's absolutely working for one side. And his masters are JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. Right.
Yeah.
And Kathy Wood of ARK Investments has said it as much. Right.
Yeah.
That he is the reason why he is pushing back on all this stuff is because the banks are terrified that DeFi is just going to hollow them out like very quickly. And in fact, is already making a dent in their revenues, like a material dent.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're a regular person in the world and somebody says, hi, if you give me your money and store it in my bank, never mind how I do it, I'll get you 20% yield a year, which is like the lowest you can get in stable coins, right? It's the easiest money to make in DeFi. Yeah. And it's completely revenue. It's not Ponzi in any way. It's just, that's what banks would make. Banks don't share that with us. So now, because these things are decentralized, they can be shared with the people who actually invest money and who should be getting it because it's their asset that's being put to work.
Yeah.
Right. So
what do you think about
terrified?
Yeah. What do you think? No, 100%. What do you think about like the stablecoin like landscape at the moment, right? I mean, I think,
Yeah.
I think like it's important. I think for people who don't know, right, there is sort of a few different buckets of stable coins going on, right? One bucket would be sort of your like traditional like USDC, USDT, BUSD, where they're backed one to one, hopefully, well, mostly for besides Tether. But like, there's the idea that the money's sitting in the bank.
Yeah.
You can withdraw it back for one, right? But all those can be frozen and confiscated in some accounts, right? So there's that. Then you've got sort of things that are in like that quasi middle spot where it's like a Frax or DAI, right? But like a lot of the collateral is still like USDC, right? Like I know the Frax guys and like they're aware of that and they're like making that community is doing a lot of things to like get off of that basically. But then the other camp that I think you've got something would be like UST, right? MIM is in sort of a different like hybrid, whatever.
I think
but
MIM is in the same camp as Frax.
yes,
so
me too.
I think they're
Yeah,
brothers.
because I agree with that, right? And then even yeah, and then you've got like UST, right? And then it's like, okay, in that landscape, right? It's like I think stablecoin usage is, I mean, such a fraction of where it's going to be, right? That's like pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And and then it's like, okay, like you said, people are faced with this choice of, okay, I could hold this one and make, like, let's say the worst yield you can get right now somewhere like with like a super centralized app or whatever, right? You're getting like 8% or something, 7% on your stable coins. Of course, people are going to do that instead of put it in the bank. And then like, but then the choice among stables is like, wow, with like UST, I can go get 20, what do you think is like, how do you think that shakes out like over the next couple of years in terms of like maybe attacks at UST or like the success that it might have?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the stable coins thing is something I'm very interested in.
Same.
We don't know what the legal landscape or the regulatory landscape is going to look like. It does feel like an attack is coming, right, from Gensler or Biden. Biden's going to announce something soon. We know Gensler's chopping at the bit to put stable coins under his purview. Luckily, we have people like Loomis and some other folks who are, in the Congress and Senate who are with us and there's a lot of new people that have learned a lot just in the last like 4 or 5 months because of the infrastructure bill, where everyone freaked out because of that one that one section, and they've never seen a freak out like that from the population. Their phones never melted off the hook the way they did because of that one passage. So they are now cognizant. And I noticed the next time there were a bunch of questions, the questions were far more intelligent. They'd clearly been reading and they understood a lot of what they'd read and they liked it. So we've made a lot of progress in the hearts and minds category just within the last 6 months. It's actually been extraordinary progress. With respect to the stablecoins war, there's a great site called stablecoinswar.com, which I watch. And currently Tether, the granddaddy of stablecoins, may be backed by US dollars in a bank, maybe not. We don't really know. But they have 43.4% market share. USDC, which is of course, the next best. That one we all are pretty sure that's legit, right? Because those are some legit people behind it. That's at about 30% market cap. So collectively, that right there is 70% of the market, right? Just those things. And then Binance is another 10% of the market. Maybe that's legit. That's probably legit, I would guess. So that's 80%. 80% is sort of Tether and Tether-like things. And the rest of it's algorithmic with Terra USD. So Terra is only backed by Luna, right? So, they print their own coin Luna and it ranges up and down in value. And you need Luna to print Terra. And anytime you run out of Terra, all they have to do is print more Luna to mint more Terra, right? And if at any time Luna collapses out of nowhere, what I don't like about it is it's a single point of failure. If the price of Luna collapses, then the backing for the Terra stablecoin vanishes, or at least depletes very quickly, right? So that is just true. So I like it and I don't like it at the same time. Overall, I'm a thumbs up on it, but I do have that criticism up.
But that makes sense. I think with UST, I think there's a couple of things on that. So I agree with you, right? You look at like what is the collateral that backs it, right? And there is one collateral that backs it. So of course, logically, like you said, if that collateral seems to not work, the experiment doesn't work, or for whatever reason, collapses in value, then of course, like so does the collateral, right? That underlying the stablecoin. So a couple of things about like Luna and UST. So with Luna, there is a fixed supply of Luna that exists right now, right? So whenever you burn Luna to mint UST, right? Yes, you do remove some of that from supply, and some of that is burned. But then if you go back the other way, some of that it's like reflexive. Some of that can come back into existence. But there's nobody right now who can actively mint more Luna to do something with, right? But the one thing that's really wild about like that setup, I think, is like pretty genius. And I'm not saying anybody's doing this. I'm just saying, like, if you're observing a system, like somebody probably could do something like this, which is, okay, like if you're holding Bitcoin, right? And the price of Bitcoin starts to drop, and all your money's in Bitcoin. Let me know if my connection's bad too at all. I just saw a little thing on the screen. But if the price of Bitcoin starts to fall,
yeah, it's starting to fade in and out.
Oh, is it? Okay. How is it? Is it okay now? Or
seems like it's okay now. It was a little ratty before, but it seems to be good.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Let me know. Sorry. You get the trade-offs when you live over here. The Wi-Fi is not as good.
Yeah,
but
I got it. I'm on a hard line, so I should be good. But
I'm jealous. Yeah, that's awesome. So okay, so let's say you're all in Bitcoin, right? And the price of Bitcoin starts to tank. If we're okay, like the price of any asset is the sum value of the buys and the sells that happen and the result of where that ends us up, right? At any point in time. So a buying in a market is a +1, a selling is a -1. Let's say if you're graphing out like what makes the price go up. So if you're holding Bitcoin and the price starts to drop, like the only option you can do, you can't sell to then rebuy because you've added a -1, then a +1, you're at neutral, you've done nothing except pay trade fees. So you could do what? Maybe you can lend your Bitcoin, borrow stables, and buy Bitcoin, right? But then like you're taking on the risk of like lending it, smart contract failure, liquidation, yada, yada, all these different things. With Luna, and I'm not saying like your normal holder who's got like 1,000 Luna or something, or $1,000 in Luna is going to do this. But if you're talking about like any community, right, you've got like giant groups like Jump, Alameda, and even like some of the founders and people who market make like these really big, anything really, cryptocurrency stocks. You've got like giant market makers who are hoping to guide the market in particular ways. They have this move in Luna that doesn't exist basically in almost any other protocol and tokenomics that I have seen, right? Maybe there's some that are copying it or something, but you basically have this ability of like, if you've got Luna here and UST here, right? You could basically burn and like dematerialize some Luna, making it more scarce, have it appear over here as UST, and then buy Luna, right? So you were able to add a +1 on the market without a -1, and so like that's insanely, and of course like it's not like that mattered the last, let's say, few weeks as Luna ate shit like everything else did, right? But overall, in terms of like a price stability point,
there are some mechanics.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've seen that mechanic. So that mechanic is used. There's a thing called Tomb on Phantom, and the Tomb is a stable coin, but it's a weird one because it's not tied to the dollar. One Tomb equals one Phantom, right? So that's a very weird thing, right? But it is a stable coin, right? Mm-hmm. And they use very Terra and Luna like mechanisms to maintain the peg to Phantom, and so they play that same game. So and it does work well, right? So far. But I want to finish the other chat. I'll make my points really quickly.
Sure, yeah.
When I was going somewhere, so I was like, okay, so now you know how Luna works, sort of, right? And what their respective market caps are. DAI is the next algorithmic, the first algorithm, or the next algorithmic stable coin, and that's at 5.4% of the market. But DAI is very largely USDC backing it, right? So that's sort of the biggest part of the pie. So much so that some people joke that it should be called wrapped USDC. It shouldn't even have its own name, right? So it's kind of funny, but kind of true.
That is pretty funny.
Now we get to Frax. Now we get to Frax and MIM, and MIM right now is at 1.54% of the market, and Frax is at 1.46. So they're sort of neck and neck. And as you know, MIM can only be borrowed by depositing yield-bearing assets, and they have a whole slew of things. I think it's like 30 or so different yield-bearing assets that you can borrow MIM with. And you have to deposit 2x, sometimes 3x, depending on what you're borrowing, the amount of collateral. So what I like about that is MIM can never be insolvent. Even if one of the collateral parts crashes or becomes insolvent, that's only one of many. So unlike where Luna only has one thing backing it, right? So I kind of like that. It's kind of compartmentalized in terms of containing the blast, if you will, if one protocol blows up. The other thing is that, as your collateral dives in value, potentially, the smart contract will liquidate you and sell everything on the market. And we saw a lot of this. We had a giant stress test with the whole, Daniel Sestigali seafood thing that happened with Wonderland, because MIM was another protocol associated with them. There was a massive stress test of the MIM ecosystem where liquidity was drained en masse from Curve, right? So the question was, will the peg survive? And it was a very severe drainage of liquidity. And basically under the worst possible stress test, MIM maintained its peg and survived just fine. And Spell is now at 1/12 of its all-time high value. I looked at that and I was like, that's a steal, because now it's proven its point. It will live through kind of anything.
Yeah.
So, and Frax, and I love Frax and I love Sam, the guy behind it. I think Sam is brilliant, possibly genius. I remember when I read the Frax white paper, it was the first time a lot of these ideas went through my brain. And it's very similar to MIM in some ways, in many ways, actually. But it's only 80% back. So it is fractional, right? So there is a little bit more danger there. But I think Sam is brilliant enough to sort of keep all the plates spilling and balancing things, that I think he'll be okay. So I think, in my opinion, both of these things are amazing buys, given that they're only 1.5% of the market each. And if laws start coming down in the US, which start severely caging USDC and Tether, just basically making them jump through all kinds of hoops, then overseas, things like MIM and Frax ought to rise in usage very quickly, possibly even supplanting Tether and USDC. And if that happens, then these will be some very, these are the early days of something that's very large later down the road. So I like both of those quite a bit.
Interesting. No, and those are two I've definitely seen you post about, for sure. And I've seen you do some breakdowns on those. Yeah. The one thing I don't like with MIM, well, I guess sort of two things, and I do like MIM overall. I think I love the possibilities of what you could do using interest-bearing assets as collateral. Like that's a whole nother conversation that probably you and I should do another hour on or something. But I don't like that with MIM, that there's not some kind of like open redeemable bank where anybody can help participate, keep the peg. It's sort of only people who've got like active loans participate. Of course, like anybody could buy or sell MIM expecting it to get back to the peg, but there's not that like redeemability per se. But nonetheless, like you said, it's gone through like what would be, like I would say, we'll
Curve is kind of the determiner of its peg, right? So if it maintains peg and curve, then it's good, right? So.
Yeah, it's funny seeing how many models are like there's so many things in crypto. It's funny like they'll like exist for a while in their current state or not drastically different, and then like it won't matter, and then all of a sudden it's just like it's everything, and then everybody copies it, like the VE like voting escrow. You're seeing like how many projects are copying that now, right? Where like everybody, you sort of like stake the token and then stake those V tokens somewhere to like align where the future inflation should go. But it is like great. It's awesome. Like it's almost like that should exist in like almost all these, in every protocol maybe. And some of these things just become so common, like that they're standard, but then it becomes the new normal and like not impressive either. But yeah, Curve is wild. Curve is so crazy.
Curve is very, very, very interesting. So yeah, it took me a while to kind of wrap my head around what was going on there, but yeah, Curve is kind of the Federal Reserve of this whole DeFi universe. And I think there's, and obviously Andre with V33, solidly, he's basically built a Curve killer on Phantom. So it remains to be seen whether he'll succeed with it or not. But, the idea is to kill Curve or at least compete with it. So
it sucks that, I hope that it seems interesting, and he's super smart for sure. I've gotten like the pleasure to hear him as of recent, like he's done some like spaces and stuff, but it'd be super interesting to see. Obviously the timing of all the Time Wonderland stuff could not have been any worse for their release date. How much do you know about Avalanche and what's going on AVAX?
I don't know as much. I've gotten very deep in the Phantom ecosystem, and that's where a lot of my heavy bets are. I do have bets in Avalanche though too. I think Avalanche is. I don't think Avalanche is as well constructed as Phantom, but I think it's pretty close, and I think it is. I think it is debatable.
Why do you think it's not? Why do you think it's not? I'm curious.
My understanding is that Phantom. I mean, Phantom uses a directed acyclic graph under the hood, not a blockchain, not a traditional blockchain. You know, not like a linked list kind of structure.
AVAX is similar in that it's sort of a DAG where for consensus you've got like straw poll going on.
Yeah. No, there are definitely some similarities. So it's very close. I mean, and they both do sharding. They both have subnets, right? Each app and each coin has its own subnet. You know, separate from the main progression of transactions.
Yeah. There's like an EVM chain.
Yeah, it's good. And they're both EVM chains, right? And the other thing that Phantom's doing things like they're building in another layer on top of they are working on their own virtual machine, but before that, they're working on improving the EVM, specifically storage. So they're working on a middleware layer, which will allow you to store variables outside of the main blockchain. And it turns out that the more smart contracts you have over time, it exponentially makes the blockchain performance degrade, right? As the linear amount of contracts increases, exponential performance degrades. If you have, and most of that is because of storage issues, contracts. So if you can solve that, they can 10x their transaction throughput volume. So if you believe now they're up about 5,000 transactions per second, you know, that will get them to 50,000, which is sort of like, you know, Solana-like transaction speed claims. So we'll see if this is real or not. It's not, you know, it's not like that today. So we'll see. But that is where they're headed. So maybe moving faster than Avalanche, I think, at this point. But you know, we'll see. Avalanche has surprised me before. I remember when they came out of the gate and they launched their blockchain and it promptly fell apart. Everyone thought they were dead forever, including me. So, like I said, they came back from the dead like out of nowhere very strongly. So you know, they are impressive people without any doubt. So we'll see.
Yeah. No, that's what's fun about all this is it's just like survival of the fittest in the most like efficient, pure, fast like pace you could imagine. But yeah, I think with it, one thing I was thinking about today, I was going to make a separate video about this, but you mentioned subnets. That was something I was going to ask you about. So I think subnets are like incredible, right? Like just, I mean, for people who don't know, like basically you've got, you know, the main net running and somebody, let's say within the way it works on Avalanche, you could launch your own subnet, right? And you basically need at least one or however many you want, validators who meet the minimum requirement, run a node for the main chain, and then can also validate yours. And basically with that, the idea is that like you've got, you know, let's just say for easy numbers, like this main chain can do, like you said, 5,000 TPS or just whatever. That's obviously a high number, but the subnet can also do that, right? And a subnet can have a subnet and could have a subnet, and each one of them could be customized to be as secure or open or private as you want them to be. What I was thinking is pretty interesting, and like because I heard this there's a video with with Do Kwon, Anatoly, and Emin of AVAX. And Doe was on there just for a little bit, and he was talking about, it's funny how you've got like wormhole and these technologies that are bridging tokens, but then now you've got like multiple bridge tokens and you've got LPs for those, and it's kind of messy. Whereas like, you know, maybe someone will make some tech that sort of encompasses like all wrap tokens, yada, yada. So it's easier. I was thinking like the sort of how like fractally stuff will play out. Like when you look at whether it's Phantom or Avalanche or whatever, is there going to be some tech, right? Is it a middleware, whatever you call it, that basically, like, let's just say, like, you know, your favorite DeFi app launches on Avalanche, and they've got like 5 chains, and you want to do a transaction. Is there some like router system basically that could like put your transaction on the cheapest chain so that you get the lowest rate, and don't have to decide which one is lower or jump vice versa? But then like, how does that actually play out? Does that mean that basically subnets will just compete the price of transactions down to basically almost free, which is cool because not that you have infinite space, but like prices only really peak whenever you've got like congestion. And so if those things can find another route to get in without active management, like maybe that's where all this goes, and then fees are basically free again. I don't know.
Well, no, you bring up a very interesting point. So the world of bridging and the world of cross-chain optimization. So, and not to pimp my favorite stablecoin meme once again, but they're a deal that they have. Oh, I can't remember the name of the company they did it with, but it's a bridging company. Basically, MIM is the only stablecoin that can jump from chain to chain with zero transaction fees. So that alone right there is, a great reason to adopt it instead of other stables. If you're not scared off by the whole seafood thing, right? So, which a lot of people are, and understandably so. So there's that. That said, and then the other sort of thing in the Daniele ecosystem that I still really like and own a lot of is Popsicle, which is cross-chain yield optimization. And the cross-chain part of it's not up yet, but it will be soon. And it does exactly what you said, but for liquidity across all chains, across all exchanges. So we'll always find you the best deal, and it'll just move stuff around through bridges without you ever having to do anything, and just keep finding you the best deals. So, and I think we're gonna, I think we'll see more and more of that. I think the bridges, I know that Vitalik is all anti-bridge lately. He's like, these bridges are crap, but I use bridges every day and they work great and they work fine. So, right, yeah, that's sort of my opinion of it. And a lot of the cross chain, a lot of the sort of L2, all that talk, it really boils down to bridges again anyway, is what it looks like to me. And so, I don't think there's a big difference between the two.
I think it was both M and Doe, and I was thinking about this before I heard them say it, but it's spot on. Is like everything's just chains and bridges at the end of the day, right? You've got like you've got a chain where settlement happens and transactions get finalized, and you've got a way to jump from one set of a system to another set. Like that's it. You're either on this lane or this lane, and you're taking the bridge to get over. Like everything comes down to that. And that's why it's funny how some things are positioned like even Matic, right? Like Matic's positioned kind of as like a friendly layer 2 for Ethereum. It's like, it's not at all. Like you don't use Ethereum. No, I mean, you may use Ethereum there as like collateral, but like if all of a sudden the usage on Matic 20x is like, that doesn't have a 20x benefit for Ethereum, like, because the economic activity happens in their token. But it's funny how some of like Trojan Horse themselves sort of in there as like the friendly layer because of the way the narratives play out. It's very interesting.
Yeah, no, I don't buy that at all either. I think I think that's more marketing than tech. In fact, I think it's all marketing. So yeah, it's chains and bridges. I'm totally with you on that. And I think that the bridges work really great, and I've never had trouble with them. So, the bridges in and out of Solana are a little wanky, so that's different, but that's not an EVM chain.
Have you used Wormhole?
I have, and
it's good.
Yeah, it's gotten better. It started off being really. I remember when I first used it, it was super rough, and it was very hard to use, and it didn't work, and it was very confusing. And then all of a sudden, it got pretty good. So
yeah,
so I guess I'm probably remembering those first times.
Unless I'm misunderstanding something, like the fee, there's basically like almost no fee to use Wormhole, right? Other than like the gas fee you have to pay to leave the chain, and then the redeem fee to claim it. Which I think I just did one from like whatever Terra to BSC, and I think collectively it was like 30 cents or something to like bridge. But the Wormhole isn't taking an actual fee for that, or if they are, I think it's like sub penny. It's so small that I think it's gonna be really interesting to see like what are the next like big services like this that almost do like the Uber approach, or the whoever, where they just like are like, okay, let's get maximum market saturation, be completely like unprofitable until like all the value sits here, and then we turn it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's very like Uber in that it's actually the true economics are not, it's subsidized by venture money, if you will, the true cost of doing everything. And maybe someday it'll be profitable, maybe it won't, but that, you gotta subsidize it for some period of time. So, and I do think that is the case going on. But if you're Solana, right, you have to get everybody off these EVM chains. There's so much activity. I mean, even now, EVM chains on, if you look at DeFi Llama, I think if you add up all the DeFi, it's still like 95%, or maybe, I think it's still 95% of all economic activity are in EVM, Ethereum-based chains. And people, you have so much activity there. It's kind of like coming out with a new, back when we were all on Windows machines, which you might be a little young for that, but I'm trying to think of a good example that's more modern. But it'd be like trying to come out with a third computing platform other than Windows or Apple, right? And be like, mine's going to be just as big, and like none of the like Office doesn't work on, none of the browsers don't work, none of the wallets work on it, right? It's just a completely new environment. So that is the problem Solana has, right? And,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
and
that's
now it's going down on a weekly basis, right? So, you know, it's
yep.
got a lot of problems.
That's
it's
the
fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah, well, that was really interesting because I was I was obviously very early on like EOS related stuff, right? Like us, like everybody involved, like launching basically like the
Yep.
first or second token that happened on EOS. And just the idea there was like, how's this going to shake out? Like, is EOS going to be this main chain? And you're going to have like sort of all these like EOS compatible chains that go off. And I think the hard part that like other chains that try to do their own their own total like different sort of consensus, right? Like even look at like like Telos, like they launched like an EVM, and that's like not a bad idea. But if you're like a Solana that's like got your own total different like OS or Cardano, like I mean, of course, like everybody's trying to bring in the world's value into these things, but like where you're talking about, 95% of the value in the space right now sits on EVM chains. It's such a hard task to like get like your own version of wrap tokens that come over there and all these other things and expect all this stuff to go there versus like just, hey, EVM's open, come in here and play around. And there's all these things you can do. And it's also hard to like bet. I mean, I'm not like, I don't know, obviously like I think other people, I guess it'd be hard to bet against Vitalik, but I also am not like bullish that like, on like ETH2 and exactly thinking it's going to be exactly how people think it's going to be. But like what happened, how does that play out like long term where you have like EVM being the dominant, and it looks like it may be that way, like kind of operating system, if you want to call it that, and dethroning that, like does that ever mean Ethereum like doesn't matter but EVM still exists beyond it, or it evolves to another thing? Do you get what I mean?
I do. I mean, it does remain to be seen. I think what we know for sure, the only thing we can say for sure right now is that EVM based chains definitely win, to some degree, probably 50% or higher, right, of all activity for the foreseeable future. And whether that's Ethereum or Avalanche or Phantom or something we don't even know about yet, it remains to be seen. But I mean, it's EVM will be impossible to dislodge anytime soon completely. So, and I do remember when EOS first launched. Remember, I was sort of playing around in that world back then too. Right?
Yeah.
I wasn't where you were, but I was playing with the wallets. I was in all the gambling sites, right? Only to learn. It wasn't because I liked gambling. It was so I get to learn, right? But to be fair, there was like all the activity for a little bit of time that were, in any of the chains that was of any interest was on EOS for a good like 3 to 6 months or something like that, right? Yeah. That was where the interesting stuff was happening. All the stuff that happened on Ethereum later hadn't happened yet. And Ethereum looked pretty broken and boring and slow and crashy.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of, and EOS was, and EOS had its flaws too, but it was fast and it was almost free. And that was pretty extraordinary for those times. So
it was very extraordinary. And like, there's so many things now you see like coming out that it's so wild with EOS. I mean, I think there's so many that again is like another couple hour thing to go down, like the story of EOS, but it's crazy that one of the biggest problems was they couldn't solve whenever there's this one scam that popped up. I forgot the fucking name, but it wasn't like necessarily scam, but it was like spam more so than anything. And it was basically like send some tokens here, and then it was like IDOS, so it was like almost like like DDoS EOS, and literally it just like made the chain unusable, right? Like people who had like $500 of EOS stake like got like a one transaction a day that they could do, and there wasn't like a fee system to pay. And that like I remember that was like a crazy big moment where that just like killed all the momentum. But then go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in my view, basically the sort of cardinal sin. I mean, Dan Larimer did some really brilliant stuff. There's no question about it. For sure. Dan Larimer also did some colossally stupid stuff, and making end users worry about and pay for RAM
and CPU,
CPU and all that stuff. That was insanely dumb. And he thought he was being very clever, but basically the end result was end users, first of all, couldn't even get going, right? Because they were this chicken and egg thing where they didn't have any RAM or CPU staked when they created a new account. So they were dependent on like, please, sir, can I have some CPU? Like people had to beg for someone else to hook them up, right? So that was sort of crime one. And crime two was, you'd be using EOS a little bit, and then all of a sudden you get like a little ding, you are out of RAM for the day, or not RAM, CPU. Like, you have gone over your CPU allotment, please come back tomorrow. right? You never want that to happen when you're trying to get usage, right? So, and that was just
and with no option to pay the fee at that time. That
yeah,
just
there wasn't like a guy you couldn't pay it, you couldn't get out of it, right? So
yeah.
that happens to you twice. You're like, screw this, I'm never coming back to this stupid chain. I mean, Ethereum's got its problems, but I never get locked out like on a regular basis, right? So
Yeah.
it's like Dan Larimer just has no concept of an end user. He's very good at sort of the engine, right? But designing like how someone can drive the car, like he has no idea. So that's sort of my impression of that. And then weirdly, Fred Krueger and his folks,
With
when they
links,
created the Proton chain, they fixed a lot of these things, right?
yeah.
And if they had done that for an EVM-based chain, I think they would be sitting very pretty right now, right? Because they also included usernames and a great wallet and all this stuff. So,
Yeah.
but they were directionally correct, I think.
Yeah, and it's weird. It's wild. Like when, like even like lately, like ENS stuff, right? Like the Ethereum name service, like buying a domain. It's like people are like, "This is incredible." And you're like, "Dude, there was like EOS name service. Like these things already existed. There's other people who've done it, but for whatever reason, it's like if these things don't get launched and adopted and they work like in pockets where the money sits, like it's like it doesn't take off, and like." Naturally, yeah, you had like Bitcoin happen first, and then a lot of the holders got, did very well, who were in very early. And some of those people, not most, but some decided to play in the Ethereum ecosystem, and then they got very wealthy amongst tons of other people. And then now the values just kind of had to flow down out of the hands of those into like these other things. And that's why, like we said, like EVM, it's because it's a much easier path to flow over to those things versus some of these experimental things. I don't know. Yeah, Solana is a weird one. Like, Solana and Cardano are like weird ones. I mean, I guess like with Solana, there's actually apps that work. That's the major difference. But it's it's so crazy that is Cardano like, is it not like the most overvalued asset like on the planet? It's like, it's insane. It's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I mean, I just like Cardano feels like, a bunch of too many PhDs writing papers and not enough sort of people writing product and kicking it over the wall and iterating really fast and having it fail in public but fixing it and then succeeding in public like Avalanche did, right?
Yeah.
Avalanche is a great example of that. So you have to have like real world product working in the real world to realize what the problems really are, not like write a bunch of papers and and impress each other with your PhDs. Nobody cares.
Well, doesn't Cardano just feel like it's going to be a documentary in a few years and then like not a good one, like not
like the Fire Festival of Chains.
Yeah, exactly. Or like the Theranos of like blockchains, like it's
it
crazy.
Does sort of feel that way.
Yeah, and like don't get me wrong, like I'm not, I don't want to sit in a spot like and throw stones. Like creating your own consensus is pretty complicated shit. Like there's a reason why there's not very many that are even worth discussing, but yeah, it's funny. It's funny, like the spot that it's in, it's so wild. But then, like, I don't know. It's like just any of these things. It's weird that because Cardano existed for many years too, right? Like it's been out. I mean, even like around EOS days, right? And then it's like to still be here. And then you're looking at the landscape and you go, okay, there's some serious shit going on with Avalanche, Phantom, Luna, like a lot of these other chains and what's going on. And then you're like, okay, but we're better though, but we're not even launched yet. But it's like, damn, like that, the longer, whatever it is, Lindy effect, that these things like stay relevant and stay where like activity is happening and keep growing and keep adopting and keep evolving. Like it's basically an insurmountable gap that's not going to be really passable by some of these projects. Like if they keep, like you said, if they're unwilling to fail, like in public on stuff.
Well, let me tell you a really quick story because this is very instructive.
Okay.
So before the World Wide Web, there was a guy named Ted Nelson, and he founded a hypertext project called Xanadu. And I think he actually started it in the 60s, right? So he's been working on this thing, and he's a PhD, MIT kind of guy, right? So, and then, so he's basically, it was always like gonna be released. And then along comes Tim Berners-Lee, and like, kind of over a weekend or whatever it was, cobbles together HTML and the first primitive browser. And all of a sudden the World Wide Web takes off like a bat out of hell. It has like, a tiny subset of the features of Xanadu, where you have all these PhDs writing papers and perfecting things and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, the web goes and does what the web does. And Ted Nelson blows a gasket, right? He just goes on a speaking tour telling everyone, don't don't waste your time on this web thing. It's never going to go anywhere. Xanadu's going to come out. You're going to want all your engineers on that, right? And then, you know, sort of into the 2000s, he's still pitching Xanadu, right? This dude has been at this for for more than 40 years, right? And when I looked at Cardano and I looked at Charles, I was like, oh my God, this feels exactly like Xanadu. I think Cardano is the Xanadu of blockchains. Yeah.
Wow, it's
the same kind of vibe, right? Very professorial, very much like we're smarter than everyone. We have PhDs. We're writing papers. There's people are nobodies, right? And,
yeah, the peons below us will soon know. No, I remember having this exact conversation with somebody about a year ago, and it's just like I never understood that as like, okay, it's peer reviewed by like, you know, professors. It's like if these guys knew what they were doing, they would build blockchains because the incentive to do so successfully is billions, right? Like at this moment. So like professor blah, blah, blah at X university, like, I don't know if his opinion matters that much about a particular thing. And I understand their logic is like, no, it's a very subset part and a logic. He's a mathematical guy, whatever. But like you said earlier, like you could run a million models about what's going to happen and looking at the landscape. But the biggest problem with every project is always what's right outside the model, because that's when your chain breaks or it shuts off, or you run into an IDOS situation, or ETH2 needs to scale. And then your rubber meets the road. And it's like, now what are you going to do? And like you said, Avalanche like had a tough time and they rebounded. ETH had whatever it was, the DAO hacker or the hack early on, right? Like there's all these like testing moments, and then great, we regroup, we keep going. But like it versus like living in this like wait till we drop land, and it's nice for hype because, you know, it is sexier narrative sometimes. It is a sexier narrative for people to go the speculation of like what will be versus the reality of like what is. But it's the only way you actually get towards adoption.
You know, I mean, look, Charles Hoskinson is the Wizard of Oz, right? I without a doubt, he is very good at making a meme coin about what he's going to do. But that's all it is. It's a meme coin. Cardano is the Charles Hoskinson meme coin, right? So, and I just don't believe it'll ever be you know, I don't know. I actually think he'll continue to do well because he's a good huckster, right? You know, he gets out there and, you know, gets up on the soapbox. He goes, well, here's what a coin will be in the future. It'll have wings. It'll fly. It'll do this. It will cure cancer, right? And like he's that guy, right? And he's good at it. And there's always new people that want to hear those stories of hope, right? So, but no, I wouldn't make anything serious on Cardano if my life depended on it.
It's the bearded lady of blockchains. Is that what you're saying?
It's the bearded lady of blockchains. Yeah, good way to put it.
So what would you say? All right, so I know we don't, you know, it's getting a little late. I wanted to ask you though, like it's maybe specific if it's okay. What are your three biggest bags? Not how much you have, but like what percentage wise are your three biggest things that you hold?
Well, I think right now it's Phantom and Boo, you know, which I sort of consider to be two sides of one coin, right? So Phantom and Boo, you know, Boo is the coin for Spooky Swap, which is the biggest exchange in the Phantom ecosystem. So there's two or one, kind of depending on how you count it.
Okay.
I also have a lot of Spell. So obviously, look, I'm in plug and mem, right? So obviously I believe in that. So that's a big one. Trying to think, I just recently reoriented a lot or rejiggered a lot of these things. You know, after the whole Time Wonderland thing, right? So
what about Bitcoin? Do you hold Bitcoin?
Oh, sorry, I guess I haven't talked about that. Yeah, actually, I have a little over half of my wealth in Bitcoin.
Okay, cool.
Kind of at all times. And that's
same.
I feel that is the safety zone. I feel that it is safer than dollars. And I feel that you know, that is going to have a God candle at some point, I think, as the US dollar has the inverse of a God candle, maybe a devil candle, right? So because as one goes up, one will go down. So I think that is an inevitability. I just don't know how long it's going to take. You know, the rest of the money, I think there's too many exciting things going on in the DeFi ecosystem to not play. And I think it's irresponsible to not play in it and just do Bitcoin only. I have friends that are like, no, you should just be in Bitcoin. It's going to do its thing. And I'm like, Well, over the last year or so, I've made too much money at the other stuff. It's without a doubt I should be in the other stuff as well. So
Yeah, that's allowed you to get more Bitcoin. And I get that. I mean, I get the logic as well of people, which is like, Bitcoin is the best and really the only one in a particular lane that it's in. That's why there's not really a second in the narrative Bitcoin's going after, right? Like Bitcoin's clearly the dominant winner. But and I get the thought of like, whatever, you're kicking the can down the road, delaying the inevitable of everybody fully adopting Bitcoin, then it becomes what it's supposed to be, yada yada. But it's like, I don't know what world people could still live in. I get if someone's personal opinions, like I don't want to play in like other chains, other coins. I just want to go Bitcoin. Like I get the peace of mind and maybe lack of time anybody wants to spend on stuff. That makes sense. But like to deny that tokenized communities surrounded around finance, art, sports, gambling, any different lane you want to go into, tying economic incentives together via a token that has utility within communities, like to deny that that's going to be so much bigger than it already is crazy to me. Like that would be denying almost up there with like that the internet is going to be, it'd be like saying social media, like who's ever going to really post where they're at? You're like, buddy, like, I don't know, 40 million people, like I'm assuming that's going to get bigger, but the problem is, it's everything is like, oh, it's going to get bigger than Bitcoin though. And then it's like, oh my God, guys, like can the family not argue on Thanksgiving? Like we're all on the same team here. Like and also too, it's like, if people who are super maxes in Bitcoin, they should embrace other chains, other things going on, because like, I know for, a lot of people I know, like whenever they make money somewhere, the idea is, oh, if I just made 20 grand, now X% of that goes into Bitcoin and it never leaves. So that you'd want the other games to go on, because that's better for Bitcoin, I think.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
So and I think I think there's going to continue to be innovation. I mean, obviously metaverses, DeFi. I don't play in NFTs. So that is the one thing I stay away from. I am the worst at picking.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie to you, dude. Me neither. Like, and I was like in a really great spot to be. Like, I designed Atomic Assets on Wax and like that, like really early on, cool. and was there like I was there like so early on NFTs where I was like, there's no way the word that this becomes big is going to be NFTs. It's too fucking like weird and like non-fungible token. Like so early that was the case, but then like it just happened, and I'm just like, I just can't. I'm like almost like an old school value investor in like my body, like looking at the market. And that's why I love DeFi so much, is you can actually evaluate stuff like you would a value stock, because you've got inflows and outflows to measure up against. Whereas like, what's the floor on this JPEG and who's actually the buyer on the other side? Like I have no idea. Like it's just,
I just don't know, dude.
I just don't know.
Cool. I'm not cool anymore, right? So I would never know that, like, apes in a yacht club who are bored, who mutate, like that somehow is cool. I would like it. I would never pick up on that. So yeah, I have no feel for it, so I stay away from it. Although the one thing
go ahead.
There's a lot of I do talk to a lot of people in the metaverse space, and you may or may not know this, but I did one of the earliest metaverses in the 90s. It was a thing called the Palace from 95 to 99. And it had 10 million users at its peak, which was like half the internet at that time, right?
Wow.
And it was backed by Time Warner, Intel, and SoftBank. So
whoa, sick.
Yeah.
Dude, that's epic.
Like we couldn't make it. We couldn't make any money out of it though. There was no, we didn't have. I mean, if we had NFTs and crypto, we would have made money hand over fist with that kind of phenomenon, right? We didn't even. But remember, we didn't even have PayPal back in those days. So we didn't have the payment rails to do much of anything, right? It was a huge phenomenon, no question about it. So when people ask me, will the metaverse work? I was like, yes, because I've already seen that work before. Is it possible to monetize it? Again, I'm just like, oh, hell yes. So I'm advising a couple companies in the space, and I do actively invest in that and look around at things in it. So, because obviously I've got some experience in that part of the world anyway. So.
Well, how do you think on the metaverse side of stuff? I mean, and maybe this is a longer answer than we have time for, but like what, like the actual interfacing with that, is it going to be people at home on multi-directional trackpads with headsets on? Is it going to be an eyeglass that is, you're in your city near the local mall, but there's this other world that you're now looking and like competing for for space on and checking out stuff, like how are most people going to interface with that world?
I think it's on a desktop, to be honest. I mean, look,
Yeah.
this is another one of these things where I hesitate to answer a little bit because, when I did it, it was in the 90s, it was 2D. It was like being in a shared comic, right? And it was actually super engaging, even so, much more so than you might be thinking, just sort of trying to picture it. I don't believe in headsets though, or helmets. I just don't think most people will wear them. I might be wrong, because maybe millennials will surprise me, but I don't think so. But I do think it's pretty engaging if you have like a big screen and you're looking at a screen. I think that's fine. So
I mean, Mark, people do wear masks in their car, man. So I would not be shocked if 100 million people will wear a helmet.
With zero benefit to that. So yeah, it might be fashionable. Yeah, I guess humanity is full of surprises. So who knows?
Yeah, I find those are good filters for people these days. Anyway, so it plays both ways. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, dude, Mark, thank you for being on so long with me, man. We definitely got to do this again. I had not been putting out a ton of content on my channel, as I've been focusing on a few things over this last like 6 months, pretty head down, that I'm excited about. So be putting out a lot more content, but thanks for coming on, man. We should definitely have another combo soon.
Alice, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on. It's been super cool.
For sure. For anybody still hanging around, thank you guys. Hit the like button, comment below, and see you on the next one. Thanks.